So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President Lincoln used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason. Habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea.
I'm very privileged and honored today to have my family with me. I'd like to introduce them to you.
Disruptions of congressional business is a violation of law, is a criminal offense under federal law. Audience members are advised to take their seats and maintain order.
Immigrants then with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country, correct?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Your question was?
Immigrants with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country.
There are individuals in this country that have applications that.
And they are legally here because it's a lawful pathway, right?
It's a lawful pathway.
Okay, so if your department then deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law, correct?
Joe Biden left us with.
I'm not asking about Joe Biden. I'm asking you a specific question. If your department deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, you are violating the law. Is that correct?
It was greatly violated when they allowed.
I'm asking you.
People to come
I'm asking you.
Asylum applications.
Why are you filibustering? Why can't you answer the question? It's a simple question.
Your president,
if your department deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is in serious legal trouble right now, facing potential criminal contempt charges from a federal judge. And here's the absolutely delicious part. The Trump administration is throwing her under the bus to save themselves. The Department of Justice, run by Trump's handpicked Attorney General Pam Bondi, just publicly blamed Noem for defying a federal court order, essentially sacrificing her to protect other administration officials. This is the Trump playbook in action. Use people until they become a liability, then discard them and pretend you had nothing to do with their actions. And Noem is learning the hard way that loyalty to Trump is always a one-way street that ends with you taking the fall alone. Here's what happened and why it matters so much. Earlier this year, a federal judge named James Boasberg issued an order blocking the deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act. Judge Boasberg first gave an oral directive, then a written order, making it crystal clear that these deportation flights needed to stop. But the flights didn't stop. The Trump administration sent a plane full of people to El Salvador anyway, in direct defiance of a federal court order. And now we know, thanks to a DOJ filing, that it was Kristi Noem who made the final decision to ignore that court order and proceed with the deportations. According to the Justice Department's own filing, DOJ and DHS officials conveyed their legal advice to Noem after Judge Boasberg's order was issued. They told her what the judge had ruled, they explained what the order required, and after receiving that legal advice, Noem directed that the detainees who had already been removed from the United States could be transferred to El Salvador's custody. She knew what the court had ordered. She was advised by lawyers about what the law required, and she chose to defy that order anyway. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. Now, the DOJ is trying to argue that Noem's decision was lawful and consistent with their interpretation of the court's order, but Judge Boasberg isn't buying it. He said that the deportees likely did not receive due process, which is a pretty fundamental constitutional requirement when the government is deporting people. And now Boasberg is seeking to revive criminal contempt proceedings against Trump administration officials who authorized these flights. Criminal contempt, for those who don't follow legal jargon closely, means that a government official willfully disobeyed a court order, and it can result in fines, imprisonment, or both. The Trump administration's strategy here is transparent and disgusting. They're pinning everything on Noem, claiming she made the final decision while trying to shield everyone else who was involved. It's the classic fall guy scenario. Noem becomes the scapegoat who supposedly went rogue and defied the court on her own, while all the other officials who were part of this decision supposedly gave proper legal advice that Noem ignored. It's a convenient story that protects the administration while hanging Noem out to dry. But here's the thing about Kristi Noem that makes this situation even more concerning. This is someone who apparently doesn't understand basic American constitutional principles. 2 months after she defied Judge Boasberg's order, Noem testified before Congress and was asked to define habeas corpus. This is one of the most fundamental concepts in American law, the foundation of the difference between free societies and authoritarian police states. And Noem got it completely, embarrassingly wrong. When asked what habeas corpus is, Noem said, "Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their rights." That's not just a little bit wrong. That's the complete opposite of what habeas corpus actually means. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires the government to provide a public reason for detaining people and to give detainees an opportunity to challenge their detention in court. It's protection against arbitrary arrest and indefinite detention. It prevents the government from just grabbing people and locking them up without explanation or due process. Without habeas corpus, the government could arrest American citizens and hold them indefinitely for no reason. It's the foundational right that separates countries like America from authoritarian regimes like North Korea. And the Secretary of Homeland Security, the person in charge of the agency responsible for protecting our nation's security, the person who oversees multiple law enforcement agencies, doesn't understand what it means. She thinks it's a power the president has to remove people from the country and suspend their rights. That's not just ignorance. That's dangerous ignorance in someone wielding enormous power over people's lives and freedom. Now, not understanding constitutional principles is generally not a great defense when you're facing criminal contempt charges for defying a court order. And for Noem, who has countless lawyers and legal advisors around her at the Department of Homeland Security, pleading ignorance probably isn't going to work. She can't claim she didn't understand what the judge ordered when she had attorneys explaining it to her. She can't claim she thought she was following the law when she was explicitly told what the law required and chose to do something else anyway. And there's historical precedent for what happens to Trump administration officials who ignore and defy court orders. In Trump's first term, we saw administration staff who did this end up disbarred or having their law licenses suspended. Jenna Ellis, for example, had her license to practice law suspended for years because of her role in Trump's election fraud schemes. Defying court orders has serious consequences for lawyers and government officials, and Noem is about to learn that the hard way. So what happens now? Judge Boasberg has several options. He could decide he needs more information before proceeding. He could put the matter to bed and decline to pursue contempt charges. Or he could find Noem and any co-conspirators in criminal contempt of court, which could involve fines, imprisonment, or both. Boasberg has already found probable cause that unnamed officials committed contempt by ignoring his order. Now that we know Noem was the one who made the final decision, she's squarely in his crosshairs. The Trump administration could appeal any criminal contempt finding to the Supreme Court and try to undercut Judge Boasberg. But they're dealing with a judge who's not some liberal activist they can easily dismiss. James Boasberg is one of the most respected conservative jurists in Washington, D.C. He was a rock-solid member of the judicial community in Washington long before Trump ever thought about running for president. He's beloved and respected by real conservatives, not the MAGA performative kind, but actual judicial conservatives who believe in the rule of law and constitutional principles. Trying to paint Boasberg as some left-wing radical is not going to work in Washington among serious conservatives, and it's definitely not going to work at the Supreme Court, where justices know him well and respect his judgment. So the Trump administration can't use their usual playbook of attacking the judge as biased or partisan. They're stuck dealing with the substance of what Noem did, which is indefensible. Even if Noem isn't thrown in jail for criminal contempt, the mere finding that she committed contempt could trigger action in Congress. Lawmakers could file articles of impeachment against Noem, pointing out that criminal contempt is indeed a high crime or misdemeanor, which is the constitutional standard for impeachment. House Republicans who opposed impeachment would have to go on the record in an election year saying that defying a judge's order is perfectly acceptable. Some Republicans, already nervous about polls showing public disgust with the Trump administration's immigration policies, might try to create distance by doing exactly what the DOJ did, throwing Kristi Noem under the bus. Noem's problems aren't just legal, they're political too. When she testified before the House committee, she got absolutely destroyed by Democrats who were prepared and knew how to ask the right questions. Representative Dan Goldman torched her on live television by getting her to admit that immigrants with ongoing asylum applications are legally in this country because asylum is a lawful pathway. Goldman then pointed out that if Noem's department deports anyone with an ongoing asylum application, they're violating the law. Noem kept trying to deflect and blame Joe Biden and talk about how the asylum system was broken under the last administration, but Goldman wasn't having it. He kept bringing her back to the simple question: if you deport people who have lawful asylum applications pending, you're breaking the law, correct? And the obvious answer, which Noem couldn't bring herself to say, is yes. If you follow a lawful pathway and you have an open asylum case, you're here lawfully. But the Trump administration doesn't care about following the law. They're deporting people regardless of their legal status, and when judges tell them to stop, they ignore the orders. And literally at the same moment Noem was getting shredded in the House committee, a federal judge delivered another huge loss to her and the Trump administration. Judge Paula Zinnes ordered the immediate release from ICE custody of Kilmar Obrego Garcia, a Salvadoran man who was mistakenly deported earlier this year before being returned to the United States. This ruling was described by the New York Times as a stinging defeat for the administration. Garcia had become one of the best-known symbols of Trump's aggressive deportation agenda, and now he's free from immigration custody and free from the shadow of being deported again. During the hearing, several lawmakers noted that a judge has found probable cause that Noem engaged in criminal contempt. Representative Jamie Raskin was particularly direct, telling Noem, "Bottom line, you lie with impunity. You reject checks and balances, and you ignore Congress and the courts. Your options are limited. Either you're going to resign, Trump's going to fire you, or you will be impeached. I've already called for your resignation. You may remember I hand-delivered my request to you back in May, and I urge you to reconsider resignation because I've taken the first step towards your impeachment, and I've called on the Judiciary Committee to open an investigation into your lawlessness." After getting destroyed by committee Democrats, Noem left the hearing and faced protesters in the hallway. She was holding a relative's baby, trying to use the child as a prop while accommodating a supporter's selfie request, and protesters swarmed her shouting, "How dare you hold that baby while you separate children from their families?" It was a perfect encapsulation of Noem's cynicism, using an innocent child as a shield while implementing policies that tear families apart. And now we're learning that Trump is considering firing Noem. According to MSNBC reporting, 4 sources familiar with the situation said Trump is considering removing Noem from her post as early as January. A White House official and a federal official said concerns over her management include the pace at which new immigration detention centers are being built. That's right. The Trump White House believes Noem hasn't been demonic enough. Specifically, White House aides and Stephen Miller, the deputy chief of staff who's the architect of Trump's cruelest immigration policies, feel that Noem hasn't been expanding detention capacity fast enough to support mass deportations. The Trump administration wants more deportations, more detention centers, more cruelty, and they see Noem as incapable or incompetent. She's not cruel enough, not efficient enough at building the infrastructure needed for Trump's ethnic cleansing campaign. So even as she's facing criminal contempt charges for being too aggressive in defying court orders, she's simultaneously at risk of being fired for not being aggressive enough in building detention camps. She can't win because there's no winning in Trump world. There's only being useful until you're not, and then being discarded. This would all be almost darkly comedic if Noem weren't such a genuinely terrible person herself. Let's not forget that this is someone who bragged in her book about shooting her 14-month-old puppy in cold blood because the dog was untrainable and less than worthless as a hunting dog. She wrote about a young dog having the time of its life chasing pheasants during a hunt, and she was so angry about this that she took the puppy to a gravel pit and shot it. She also wrote about trying to train the dog with an electric shock collar. J.D. Vance, before he apparently forgot about Noem or decided to ignore her past, gave a whole speech about how people who are cruel to animals are bad people who will be cruel to humans as well. He talked about how every serial killer has been really bad to animals, how that's how they start. He said if you're not taking care of God's creatures, you're certainly going to be a pretty bad person otherwise too. And he was absolutely right about that, even if he was too stupid or too cynical to acknowledge that he was describing his own administration's Secretary of Homeland Security. Vance's comments reportedly infuriated Noem because they reminded the nation about her puppy-killing past. But Vance was right. Someone who can shoot a puppy because it wasn't immediately perfect at hunting is someone who lacks basic empathy and has a cruel streak that absolutely translates to how they treat human beings. And we see that every single day in how Noem's Department of Homeland Security and ICE agents terrorize migrant workers, American citizens, and anyone else the Trump administration targets. There's video from Virginia recently of ICE agents stopping a woman named Jackie Andre, who was driving her 16-year-old daughter to school. They asked for her social security number. She became flustered, probably terrified about what was happening, and the agents arrested her right there in front of her daughter. You can hear the teenage girl screaming and crying as her mother is taken away. Andre and her family have no record of violent crimes or charges. They weren't dangerous criminals. They were just a mom trying to get her kid to school. But this is America under Trump, Vance, and Noem. People who are cruel to dogs will be cruel to people. Vance said it himself, and whether it's shooting puppies or using violence to arrest peaceful human beings going about their daily lives, Noem is a symbol of everything that's wrong with this administration. She's the pistol-packing paragon of cruelty, wielding power without understanding the constitutional principles that are supposed to constrain it, defying court orders when they get in the way of her agenda, and now facing the consequences of her lawlessness. Kristi Noem is going down. She's facing criminal contempt charges. She's being blamed by her own administration for decisions they all participated in. She's at risk of being fired for not being cruel enough fast enough. She's being called out for impeachment by members of Congress. And through it all, she's demonstrating exactly why someone who would shoot a puppy for not being immediately perfect shouldn't be given power over other people's lives and freedom. The only question now is whether she resigns, gets fired, gets impeached, or gets convicted of criminal contempt. Maybe all of the above. But one thing is certain. Kristi Noem's days as a member of Trump's cabinet appear to be numbered, and unlike the puppy she killed, nobody's going to mourn her political demise. She chose to hitch her wagon to Trump's authoritarian agenda. She chose to defy court orders. She chose cruelty over compassion at every turn. And now she's learning what everyone who gets involved with Trump eventually learns. You're only useful until you're not, and then you get thrown away like yesterday's garbage.